Have you ever found out you weren't invited to a family celebration everyone assumed you'd be attending? Have you ever smiled and convinced yourself there had to be a simple explanation, even though something deep inside told you otherwise? Have you ever realized that sometimes the most painful rejection isn't being left out? It's discovering how easily everyone else accepted it. My son and his wife were about to celebrate their 10th wedding anniversary. I remember the day they got married as if it had happened yesterday. His father had passed away just a few months before the wedding, and I promised myself I would do everything I could to help them build a happy life together. Over the years, that promise became part of my everyday routine. If money was tight, I quietly helped. If the grandchildren needed something, I bought it. When unexpected bills showed up, I found a way to make sure they were paid. I never asked for recognition. They were my family. That's what family does. As the anniversary approached, friends from church kept asking me what I planned to wear to the celebration. Every time someone mentioned it, I smiled and said, I hadn't decided yet. The truth was, I was still waiting for my invitation. At first, I assumed they were simply busy. Planning a big anniversary party isn't easy. A few more days passed, still nothing. I called my son one afternoon, but it went straight to voicemail. He texted later saying he'd call me back, but the call never came. I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe they were planning to surprise me. Maybe the invitation had gotten lost. But the closer the anniversary came, the harder those explanations became to believe. The morning of the celebration, I walked past the gift I'd already wrapped for them. It was sitting neatly on my dining room table with a handwritten card tucked beneath the ribbon. I looked at it for a long moment before quietly sitting down beside it. Something didn't feel right. That evening, while I was making myself a cup of tea, my phone buzzed with a Facebook notification. My daughter-in-law's mother had just posted pictures from the anniversary party. I smiled, expecting to see my son looking happy. Then I noticed something else. Every picture included relatives, friends, and neighbors. Everyone seemed to be there except me. I stared at the screen, trying to understand what I was looking at. Then my eyes dropped to the caption beneath the very first photo, and my heart sank. The caption was only 2 words long: family only. For a second, I wondered if I was reading too much into it. Maybe it was just a harmless phrase. Maybe I was letting my disappointment get the better of me. But as I scrolled through the rest of the pictures, those excuses disappeared. There was my son, smiling with his arm around my daughter-in-law. There were her parents standing proudly beside them. Their cousins were there. Friends from church were there. Even neighbors I barely knew had been invited. I kept looking, hoping I'd somehow missed my own face in the crowd. I hadn't. I was the only person who should have been there, who wasn't. The embarrassment came first. The anger didn't arrive until a few moments later. It wasn't just that I had been left out. It was realizing everyone else already knew I wasn't coming. They had smiled for the photos while I sat at home beside an anniversary gift that would never be opened. Then I noticed something else. My daughter-in-law's mother had replied to one of the comments beneath the post. Someone had written, "Beautiful family," she answered with a smiling face and the words, "Just the people who truly matter." I read that sentence 3 times. My chest felt tight. I stared at the screen for several seconds. My husband used to tell me that once words leave your mouth, you can't take them back. I wasn't looking for an argument. I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone, but for the first time in years, I stopped worrying about keeping the peace at my own expense. I pressed the like button. Then I typed one sentence beneath the post. Then I'll stop paying the bills only family should pay. I looked at the words one last time before pressing post. There was no anger behind them, just the truth. I set my phone on the kitchen table and took a sip of my tea. Less than a minute later, it buzzed. My son's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring. Then my daughter-in-law called. I didn't answer. Then another call. Then another. Soon, my phone barely stopped vibrating, long enough for me to read the names. 5 minutes after posting that one sentence, I looked down at the screen. 30 missed calls, 1 voicemail, 7 text messages. I slowly picked up the phone. Just as I was about to listen to the voicemail, another call came through. This time it was my son again. I answered. Before I could say hello, his first question told me everything I needed to know. They weren't calling because they'd hurt me. They were calling because of what my comment had just cost them. Before I could say hello, my son blurted out, "Mom, please delete that comment." Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "I'm sorry." His first concern was the Facebook post. I closed my eyes for a moment. Then I quietly asked, "Is that really why you're calling?" There was a long silence. Finally, he sighed. "Everyone's asking questions," he admitted. "Her parents are upset. People are wondering what you meant." I looked out the kitchen window before answering. "They're asking the right question," I said. "Now, it's your turn to answer it." A few seconds later, my daughter-in-law took the phone. "This has gotten completely out of hand," she said. "Mom was only joking with the caption. You know she didn't mean anything by it, huh?" I let her finish. Then I calmly asked, "Did she tell everyone I wasn't invited?" Another silence. "No," she finally whispered. "Did anyone at that party ask where I was?" I continued. "Some people did," she admitted. "And what did you tell them?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I already knew. "I'd like to ask you one more question," I said. "Which bills would you like me to keep paying?" Neither of them spoke, so I answered for them. "The daycare bill that comes due next week?" I paused. "The car insurance I've been paying every 6 months?" Another pause. "Or maybe the utility bill that's automatically drafted from my account every month?" The silence on the other end became almost unbearable. Then I heard another voice in the background. "What bills is she talking about?" It took me a second to realize it was my daughter-in-law's mother. My son took a slow breath. "She doesn't know," he said quietly. "Know what?" her mother asked. My son hesitated before answering. "Mom's been helping us for years." Another silence followed. Then her mother spoke again, but this time her voice sounded completely different. "Wait, your mother has been paying those bills?" "Not all of them," I replied gently. "Just the ones you never knew about." "I never paid those bills because anyone asked me to. I paid them because I wanted my son and grandchildren to have a little less to worry about. I never expected anyone to thank me. But hearing that I wasn't family changed everything." My daughter-in-law finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know it had become this much." "That's the problem," I replied softly. "You didn't know because neither of you ever asked." No one argued after that. There wasn't anything left to defend. Then I said the one thing none of them expected to hear. "Don't worry about the Facebook comment," I told them. "I'm not deleting it." I paused before adding, tomorrow morning, I'm simply going to stop paying every bill that only family should pay. For the first time that evening, they understood I wasn't making a threat. I was making a decision. The next morning, I did exactly what I had said I would do. I canceled every payment that had quietly become part of my monthly routine: the daycare tuition, the car insurance, the automatic payment for their utility bill. None of those accounts were in my name. I had simply been paying them because I wanted to help. By lunchtime, my phone started ringing again. This time, I answered. My son sounded exhausted. "Mom, the daycare called. They said the payment didn't go through." "I know," I replied calmly. "The insurance company called too," he continued. "They said the policy could be canceled if we don't pay by the end of the week." I let the silence settle between us before asking one simple question. "Did you think those bills paid themselves?" He didn't answer. A few hours later, there was another knock at my door. When I opened it, my daughter-in-law's mother was standing there alone. She looked nothing like the confident woman from the Facebook pictures. She looked embarrassed. "May I come in?" she asked quietly. We sat at the kitchen table for several minutes before either of us spoke. Finally, she looked at me and said, "I honestly didn't know." I believed her. She wasn't defending the post anymore. She was trying to understand the damage it had caused. "My daughter never told me you were helping them financially," she continued. "Your son didn't tell me either." I nodded, "because I never wanted anyone to know." She lowered her eyes. "Then I owe you an apology." I shook my head gently. "This was never about the money." She looked confused. "Then what was it about?" I glanced toward the family photographs hanging on my living room wall. "It was about being treated like I belonged, only when I was useful." She didn't have an answer for that. Before she left, she quietly said something I hadn't expected. "I deleted the Facebook post this morning." I smiled politely. "Deleting the post won't erase what it revealed." She slowly nodded because she knew I was right. That evening, my son called again. His voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. "Mom," he said, "I kept thinking about those bills all day." He paused, searching for the right words. And then it hit me. We stopped seeing them as help. Another quiet pause followed. "We just started expecting them." I closed my eyes for a moment. Hearing him say those words hurt almost as much as the Facebook post because I knew they were true. Before I could respond, he quietly added, "There's one more thing you need to know." My heart sank. The kids saw the Facebook post before it was deleted. The next afternoon, my son asked if he could bring the children over. "They have questions," he said quietly. "Questions I don't think I can answer by myself." I agreed. When they arrived, my youngest grandson ran over and hugged me the way he always had. But my oldest grandson stayed back. He looked unusually quiet. Finally, he asked the question that had been weighing on him. "Grandma, why weren't you at Mom and Dad's anniversary?" I looked at my son. He looked back at me and slowly nodded. This time he wasn't asking me to protect him from the truth. He wanted his children to hear it. I knelt beside my grandson and smiled gently. "Sometimes," I said, "grown-ups make mistakes without realizing how much they hurt someone else." My grandson frowned. "Did Mom and Dad hurt your feelings?" Before I could answer, my son spoke. "Yes, buddy," he said softly. "We did." The room fell silent. Then my son looked at his children and continued, "Grandma wasn't invited because we stopped thinking about how our decisions made her feel. We were wrong." My daughter-in-law lowered her head. Tears filled her eyes as she quietly added, "And I let my mom's words speak for all of us. I should have stopped it the moment I saw that post." No one rushed to fill the silence that followed. It didn't need excuses anymore. It needed honesty. My oldest grandson looked from his parents to me. Then he asked a question none of us expected. If Grandma wasn't family, then why was she paying for our daycare? My daughter-in-law covered her face with both hands. My son stared at the floor. Neither of them answered because they couldn't. The answer would only make the truth hurt more. My grandson walked over and wrapped his arms around me. "You're family to me," he whispered. I hugged him tightly, feeling tears run down my face. A few moments later, my daughter-in-law sat beside me. "I've been thinking about that Facebook post ever since you left the comment," she said quietly. At first I was embarrassed because everyone saw it, but now I realize that wasn't the worst part. She looked directly at me for the first time. The worst part was realizing that if someone had asked me to describe our family that morning, I would have listed everyone except the person who had been carrying us for years. I reached over and gently held her hand. "People make mistakes," I said. "What matters is what they choose to do after they finally see them." The following Sunday, there was another family gathering. This time, it wasn't at a restaurant or an event hall. It was in my backyard. My son insisted on cooking. My daughter-in-law helped set the tables. But every few minutes, she stopped to ask if I was happy with where everything was placed. She wasn't asking because she needed permission. She was showing respect. Before we sat down to eat, she stood up holding a glass of iced tea. Everyone grew quiet. She looked around the table before turning toward me. "Last week," she said, "my mother wrote, 'family only.'" Her voice trembled. "Today I finally understand what family really means." She walked over, hugged me, and smiled through her tears. "Family isn't who ends up in the photo," she said softly. "It's the people who've been there all along." My grandchildren started clapping. Then everyone else joined in. I looked around that table and realized something I would never forget. They hadn't changed because I stopped paying their bills. They changed because, for the first time, they understood what those bills had always represented. It had never been about the money. It had always been about knowing someone loved you enough to carry part of your burden. The day they finally understood that was the day we became a family again.